When you connect with others, you know what that feels like. You know that it really enhances the experience. Even small moments of connection really can be incredibly meaningful and make the difference between being a miserable old git and actually somebody who's kind of connected and join in. And once you kind of recognize the feelings of the power of that connection, you can then start to put that into play in your life in general.
This is The Method, a podcast from Thriver about what health looks like in the real world.
I'm Dr. Greg Potter. I'm a scientist and health and performance consultant.
And I'm Charlie Edmondson. I'm definitely not a science expert. I've got a regular job and I'm here to remind Greg of what life's actually like when you're not a nerd.
You must be a nerd about something, I bet you are. On this show, we'll work out some sustainable changes to your routine that are actually going to make a difference to your health. And to do that, we have a simple 3-step method. With the help of an expert, we first unpack the science behind one key health question. Second, we give some recommendations related to what we're speaking about on the day. And then finally, we put the practice to the test.
Each week, we're going to hear from those who have tried and tested our recommendations to help turn a so-called ideal lifestyle into something that actually works for you. Hello. Hello.
Is it me you're looking for?
Well, I always think with one of those, you could go with two, couldn't you? You could go, hello, it's me. You could do Adele or Lionel.
Oh, right. Who did you gravitate to?
Adele, obviously.
She's a bit of a champion, isn't she?
Yeah, she's absolutely mega.
Girl could sing.
Pipes on her.
Has she called you up yet?
I'm waiting.
Support act, as in she will be your support act.
Yeah, imagine. Adele, get back there. This is my stage, my mic. Thank you.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. A bit tired this week, a little bit tired, but I'm all right. Powering on.
Full on?
Full on. Life is busy. Mm-hmm. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited about today's conversation, about the guest in particular, because he seems like a lovely man. And I first came across his work several years ago and have never had the chance to meet him.
Yes. Our guest today is Julian Abel. Julian is a retired palliative care consultant and director of Compassionate Communities UK, an organisation focused on sharing what we can learn from palliative and primary care to improve health and well-being. Julian spent much of his clinical career supporting people at end of their life before turning his attention to the role that compassion, community and social connections play in our health. In 2016, he led the Frome Project, a pioneering community building initiative that explored whether stronger social connections could improve health outcomes and reduce pressure on healthcare services.
And it's a really interesting project. I came across Julian's work through a podcast hosted by previous guest Tommy Wood, the Nourish, Balance, Thrive podcast. And that was around the time at which people were starting to recognize the importance of relationships for general health, but it still wasn't that widely discussed. There was a very influential analysis done in 2015 by a scientist named Julian Holt-Lundstad. And she looked at all relevant studies and found that loneliness, social isolation, and living alone were each associated with a 26 to 32% increase in odds of passing away in years to come relative to their peers that didn't experience that. And the size of those effects is quite similar to many traditional risk factors that contribute to early mortality. And nowadays, I think a lot of us recognize the importance of relationships to health. And maybe much of that was spurred on by the COVID pandemic, because that was a time when that was forced on us in a way that it hadn't been previously. And I think many of us felt that.
Yeah, massively. I always remember like during COVID thinking, and everyone was like, oh, what are you missing? And I was like, people. I'm not actually that bothered I was racing triathlon at the time. And I was like, I just want to see my friends.
We also started working together early in the COVID pandemic, so I might have contributed to that feeling. I just want to see my friends rather than being stuck online with this nerd.
Not Greg every day. Weird. I forgot that was what, yeah. Well, some good things came from a global pandemic.
But it was a challenging time. Have you changed anything off the back of that phase of your life? Did it make you more conscious of the need to nurture relationships, for example?
I think it really highlighted who I want to spend time with. It probably made me a little bit more selfish in some respects. I'm a busy person anyway. My diary is absolutely ridiculous. But pre-COVID, especially when I was racing and life was hectic, I'd say yes to doing a lot more things. I think it really made me shift my mindset that actually going and doing a 30-mile bike ride and then leaving the afternoon free to go and see friends or see your parents or family or whoever it was that's close to you was more important.
It's the quality of the time that matters.
Yeah, 100%. And we've got some really good habits off the back of COVID. So like when me and the girls, we always meet for coffee on a Friday morning at 7:15. So go to the gym, do our workout, meet at 7:15. We're all back in our cars for 7:45. But it's like half an hour of a coffee on a Friday morning. Get to catch up with everyone. And it doesn't actually take that much time out of your week, but it's a really lovely habit that we've got into that you can say, how was your week? How's everything? What are you doing this weekend? Off you go.
Maybe some people feel like there's necessarily a trade-off to make, like spending that time might hamper your performance. However, if what you're doing with those people that you care about is either neutral or good for you, I don't see a reason why you can't have both.
Mm-hmm. If anything, I don't think I could have ran the marathon time that I did this year if I was still in the situation I was before COVID, because like my support network was big, but I probably didn't lean on them as much to sort of say like, I am exhausted, I'm so tired. Like, whereas now, especially through marathon training, like ringing my best friend Oliver just to say that was a really, really, really tough session. Feel like my head's fallen off, I'm not going to get to my goal, and just having that 10-minute chat with him. And then you come away and you're like, it's one session in the grand scheme of it. You've got 100 sessions. That one session is not going to make or break it.
Is he quite a wise guy?
Oliver.
Quietly. Does he keep your head screwed on?
Yeah, massively. We're both just very, very straight talking. We met when we were 12 and have been such close friends ever since then that we both know how each other's brain works and he knows for me if I'm like saying, oh, this has gone really bad, he'd be like, really?
Catastrophizing.
Yeah. He just
Not
like nips it in the bud straight away. Look at the positive, move on.
Yeah. If you have a choice, surround yourself with positive people.
Definitely. Always.
Yeah.
Put your positive pants on.
Get your positive pants on. Should we find out if Julian's wearing his positive pants today?
I hope he is. Let's find out.
Hi, Julian. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Before we get to the science of today's episode, we're keen to start with your clinical background. And earlier today, I read a short article that you wrote that puts it into perspective nicely. The piece is entitled Trains to Life, Trains to Death. And I found it very moving and would recommend it to anyone listening. It's really a personal story about the power of compassion. To kick us off, could you share the essence of it with us?
Okay. So I'm a palliative care clinician by background, retired now for quite a few years. And my background is that both my parents were Jewish refugees, and they came over to the UK when they were about 10. My mum came on the kinder train as this 9-year-old girl on her own, travelling to a new country. And my grandmother on my mother's side died in a concentration camp. And when I visited Berlin, I went and had a look at the statue outside of the Friedrichstraße station. It shows children carrying their suitcases. And obviously it was a resonant moment because that was my mum and my dad, And then you start thinking about, well, that could have been my kids, it's just like my kids were a similar age and all of that. Why has that happened? And when you narrow it down, lying at the heart of it is a lack of compassion. And that lack of compassion is absolutely catastrophic and has ramifications in all kinds of different areas, including politics, economics, philosophy, all that sort of stuff. And I had for a number of years been interested in what's called the public health approach to palliative care, which is saying that actually death, dying, loss and caregiving happens to everyone multiple times in their life. Every year, 1% of people die. 9 people are affected by that on average. That's 10% of the population every year experience death, dying, loss and caregiving, and it's up to the 90% to support the 10%. In all of the different environments in which that happens, and of course that happens in every environment, schools, workplaces, public spaces, museums, galleries, media, wherever it is. And the thing that makes the difference is compassion. Compassion for your friends, for your family members, for people you don't know, for people experiencing suffering of any kind. Compassion lies at the heart of good social relationships, which play out in human health and well-being, and even the survival of the planet. And we could talk for hours on that, because that just go on forever, and I'll resist the temptation.
Thanks for sharing. I think it tees up the rest of the conversation very nicely. And you mentioned compassion there, and compassionate communities brings us to Frome, which is maybe the project that you're best known for. The Frome Project started in 2016. Frome's a small town in Somerset in England. And there you contributed to a kind of community experiment. And the idea was to enhance community life, starting at the level of the GP practice, and then extending into other areas of life too, to improve the health of people in that area. What was the need in Frome in particular, and why was it well suited to this type of project?
Well, it's an interesting one. So the person who led it is a GP called Helen Kingston, and she worked in a small GP practice for about 3,000 people. And back in 2013, there was this move to combine all the GP practices together. And Helen didn't want to lose the intimacy of connection with people. So she thought it would be a good idea to think about doing something different that would help people to keep connected. And she employed a community development worker called Jenny Hartnell and based her in the practice to do 2 things. One is for people who were coming into the health centre who in some way needed help and support outside of just the traditional medical services. So Jenny and her team would see people one-to-one and work with them to try and figure out what's going on with them and what they would like to do and how they could be connected to the world around them. And then the other bit was working directly in community development, gathering together community resources and helping to stimulate and further develop these resources so that the town became more connected. And I joined in 2016 because I happened to be living nearby at the time. And we realized we were doing the same thing. So we just joined forces. And as it turns out, in the town council recently had elections and the independents for Frome were elected. And the independents for Frome, because they weren't tied to party dogma, actually were really keen for developing things for local people that was completely in keeping with the work that Jenny Hartnell was doing in terms of community development. So what you had was a whole combination of circumstances come together, which created a kind of healthcare revolution in a quiet way, because the outcomes were extraordinary.
What were some of the outcomes of the experiment?
So we knew that something good was going on because we could tell from the stories that people were talking about how their lives were transformed in a way that you would never get with medicine, with taking a tablet or having an operation or whatever. And then it got to the annual agony of trying to find funding to keep the project going. We decided that it would be a good idea to produce a scientific paper on the basis that maybe science would make a difference So we looked at the results of the emergency admissions, and what we saw in Frome over a 4-year period, whole population emergency admissions had dropped by 15%, whilst in the rest of Somerset they'd gone up by 30%. Now, because of the work I've been doing previously, I knew about the significance of this, and I knew that there are no interventions ever which have dropped whole population emergency admissions. If there was a tablet that could reduce whole population emissions by 30%, it would be a medical miracle, the likes of which we've not seen before. And this problem is so enormous that governments around the world have given up trying to do anything about it. But it wasn't a tablet, it's compassionate communities combined with healthcare. And the cost savings are so large it makes your eyes water simply by reducing emergency admissions.
The original paper noted that elsewhere in Somerset, there are elements of the Frome Project that have been rolled out. However, they weren't nearly so successful. There was something about the combination of the different elements of the intervention that was essential to having such a large effect on population health. Can you spell out what those elements were?
Sure. So essentially, there are 4 critical components. The first one is the compassionate communities bit, the community development, which is about making Frome a friendly town, about bringing everything together and making visible what's invisible, connecting it up. One component. Second component is the use of health connectors, which are the people, this one-to-one work that goes on inside the practice. The third component is about making sure that people who have been discharged from hospital actually get a phone call, because that's a great time for trying to think about behaviour change, because generally the experiences of hospital are so unpleasant, even if it's nice, even if you're well looked after, that you don't want to go back there. And so you think, okay, why don't we ring people up and see what's happening with them? And often you come across people who are vulnerable just being discharged from hospital. The fourth component is really creating this hub inside the GP surgery in which you can track the phone calls and all the complex cases. Now, I'll give you an example that helps to illustrate this. If you look at a good social prescribing service, a really good one might see 1% of the population every year. But if you were to ask what percentage of people will feel lonely and isolated at any one time, that will be between 20 and 40%. And if you really want to have an impact on the modern sickness of lack of belonging, loneliness and isolation, you have to have this community-based intervention. And what we know is unless these 4 major components are in place, it doesn't work. So yeah, this compassionate communities or community development is something that's been happening all over the world. It's not something unique to, this just happened in Frome. I'm now supporting an area in Norway just outside of Oslo that's doing this, but doing it in a very scientific way as part of a trial. And they've got a really great team who are doing the work there, and a very large project in Colombia and a smaller one in US, one in the southwest cluster of Cardiff. And the results that they got from the southwest cluster of Cardiff were very similar to the ones we had in Frome. So it is reproducible, but it's when you take this ground up community development, whole population approach, that's where you start to see the changes. And that really points towards this profound biological impact of belonging, isolation, and loneliness, which is where the kind of science really kicks in.
It would be great to discuss how nurturing good relationships with other people can affect our physical health. So looking at a different range, so heart health, immune function, brain health, whatever it is. Could you walk us through some examples of what the science shows?
Sure. So when you start to look for the pathways, you go, okay, look, social relationships have a profound impact on health and well-being. Well, what on earth is going on there? When you start to look at the pathways inside the body as to how this happens, you see them everywhere. There isn't a place where you look where you don't find it. One of the papers that would describe the science really clearly was by George Slavich, Summer Mengelkock and Steve Cole. And that's the field of human social genomics. The impact of how people through community affect relationships, you find it everywhere. And in particular, there's a couple of places that's worth speaking about. The first is this whole business about our prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain which, if you like, is the best of our human qualities. It's about making sense of memory, social connection, rational thought, creative imagination, all kinds of things. And when we feel threatened, access to our prefrontal cortex is shut down. So if the saber-toothed tiger is rampaging through the village, then
things have got a bit wild in Cornwall.
Exactly. Yeah, we got lots of them, trust me. So thinking about this from an evolutionary perspective, when the saber-toothed tiger comes hunting, access to the prefrontal cortex is not an issue, because if you think about something, by that time the saber-toothed tiger will have eaten you. So it closes down this access to the prefrontal cortex and gets the body ready for fight, flight, fright, freeze, all of that kind of stuff, the adrenaline pumping and muscles ready and all that sort of stuff. But it turns out this same pathway lights up when people feel lonely and isolated. And in a hunter-gatherer setting, you can really make sense of that, because if you're lonely and isolated, you're separated from your tribe. And then what happens is, your food security goes out the window, you can't bring up children, relationships can't happen. There's all kinds of things which are in the hunter-gatherer setting. You're more at risk of predation. If you get ill, if you fall and cut yourself, all sorts of things create an emergency. In the modern world, that loneliness and isolation and that lack of belonging is a modern sickness. And what that means is the ability for the best parts of ourselves to flourish gets switched off, which takes us back to trains for life, trains for death, our ability to be compassionate, kind, and caring. If, on the other hand, you create belonging, what happens is that these pathways open up, and this has a direct impact on our inflammatory pathways. So in particular, what happens around white blood cells, the expression of inflammatory proteins, the mobilization of primitive white blood cells, such as mast cells, etc., all happens in this loneliness and isolation context, in this fight and flight, preparing us for disaster. And the healthy pathways get switched off. And when you start looking at something like heart disease, for example, actually, heart disease is an inflammatory process. Now, the same process, this same inflammatory process about which genes are switched on and switched off, is present in most of the modern diseases that we have. And that includes diabetes, heart disease, cerebrovascular disease, cancer, metastatic spread of cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's and other autoimmune diseases. So there's a significant part of the sickness of the modern world which relates to the modern way of living, of loss of belonging, of isolation and loneliness. And the figures of, 20 to 40% of people feeling lonely at any one time are common all over the world.
Before we move to the practice section, I'll just summarize what we've covered so far. We began with a discussion of the power of compassion, which is distinct from empathy, which is about understanding and feeling what others feel, whereas compassion is about acting to support others and help them feel better in the process. It's up to the 90% of us to look after those in need. We then moved to the Frome Project, and that tested the power of better caring for people within a single GP practice in Somerset. Comprised 4 steps. One was identifying people in need. Another was goal setting and planning care for those people. Then there was enhancing support networks and also linking people with resources within the community. And the result was about a 14% drop in unplanned hospital admissions, but also a 29% increase in the rest of Somerset suggests that the magnitude of change was actually very large indeed. And we didn't speak about this, but in the paper you also noted that the return on investment was about £6 for every £1 that was spent. And now similar projects are taking place elsewhere in the world. We wrapped up the section with a short discussion of how social isolation and loneliness affect our physical health. They are inherently stressful, and we see that across different levels of our biology, from shifts in the patterns of expression of genes in our cells to changes in activity in the brain. And that type of stress can promote a range of stress-related ailments, everything from cardiovascular diseases to immune dysfunction to mood disorders to neurodegenerative conditions too that will contribute to cognitive decline. And the question then becomes, what do we do about all of that? So, Charlie, back to you.
So now we're going to look at the practical side of things. And I know we've just touched on in the science section about how important compassion is and connection are for our health. But it's not always obvious how to put that into practice. So if someone was listening that wanted to look at building more connection into their daily life, where would you suggest that they begin?
So I think the simplest way of going about this is to get you guys to talk about what you like doing, more than giving out smoking, drinking, diet, exercise, and everything else you care to imagine. Why don't we take the things that we already do, that we like doing, and add in social connection, because they're going to magnify the impact. Now, I don't know if anyone is actually watching this, but Charlie's got bikes on the wall behind her. And I'm making an assumption that you like biking. It's not Sherlock Holmes.
No, it's awful.
Well, you got one of those fancy ones that, which you can lean forward. So if you hate it, you're doing a good job. So tell us about what kind of biking do you do, Charlie?
So I used to race triathlon quite competitively, not as much anymore, not at all really anymore, but still cycle, run, gym, climbing, anything to do with sport really.
Okay, so do you do those in a social setting, or are they a sole pursuit for you?
So running is solo. Gym is definitely with people. Bouldering, I would say, is 50-50. Sometimes on my own, sometimes with friends. I mix it up.
Okay. And what's the experience like when you do stuff with other people?
I love it. It's such a good buzz.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed when I was training for triathlon and racing triathlon, I used to do a lot of swimming on my own, and swimming's quite difficult to make social because your face is in water. So it's not like you can have a conversation. But I went and joined a club because I found it was so lonely. I didn't love the early mornings of swimming anyway, but getting up at 4:30 to go and get in a pool on your own was torture. So I went and joined a club and just found that 10 minutes on poolside, 5 minutes on poolside chatting in between reps, chatting after the session made it a lot more enjoyable than doing it on my own. I don't think I would have stuck it out on my own.
See, one of the really amazing things about all of this stuff is, I know we've been talking about science, but the big thing is that you can make sense of this at an emotional level in your own life. Like when you connect with others, you know what that feels like.
Yeah.
You know that it really enhances the experience. And that thing about it's a great example is the swimming club and the, doing stuff on your own. Actually, even small moments of connection really can be incredibly meaningful and make the difference between being a miserable old git and actually somebody who's kind of connected and join in. Once you kind of recognize the feelings of the power of that connection, you can then start to put that into play in your life in general. You can do it in your activities, but you can do it in your home when you're sharing food. You can do it when you go down the shops and you just chat to people in a nice way in the shops. If I were to ask you about which shops do you like going to, it'll be shops where you connect with the people who are, you might chat with other community members in the shop, then be regular visits, you get to know people, or the people who run the shop or whatever it is. You can start thinking about where you put this into practice in your life. So it's incredibly practical and simple and straightforward. And I'm sure, Greg, we could have the same conversation. What do you like doing? And then you say, well, whatever it is, what do you like doing? It might be dancing.
Greg, is it dancing?
That would not have been my first choice.
Well, dancing, because it's a social activity, has got so many benefits, as well as all of the benefits of movement that you get from participating in that. So it can be anything like that. Once you add in the social connection, whatever you do can be done in the context of social connection.
I'm going to take you dancing, Greg. Next time you're in Manchester, me and you, we're going out.
You're in Manchester?
I am.
For goodness me, how can you not dance in Manchester?
I dance all the time. Put a tune on and I'm first on the dance floor.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people nowadays feel like modern life is not very conducive to building meaningful connections. Like it's harder to do that than it used to be for whatever reasons. Do you think that that's true? And if so, do you think that we need to account for that in some way to overcome it?
So look, if you open a door, like let's say after this podcast, you go downstairs and you exit the building and you open the door for Charlie and Charlie walks through the door. Well, what happens in that moment is that there is this, we're talking about these biological cascades of the impact of kindness that happens at that moment. And it doesn't happen just in Charlie because you've been a gentleman, but it happens in you as well because you've participated in that. And it happens in anyone who's watching. And furthermore, for anyone who's, this is on the way home from work and you get in the car and you drive home, assuming you're not overcome with road rage, that you arrive home.
50-50.
Well, if you're riding a bike, it's bound to be road rage. Anyway, that you get home and then that sense of well-being and connection continues in your home in the way that you greet your family members. And by the way, when the dog comes along and greets you, guess what's happening there?
Oh,
exactly the same thing.
I've got 2 dogs. And I tell you what, the joy of 2 little Cocker Spaniels when you open that kitchen door in the morning, instant positivity cup full.
Yeah.
I know we've obviously just been chatting there about sort of when coming home to dogs, coming home to family, whoever it is that you live with. What about if there was someone who was living alone? What change could they make to try and build some more connection?
So that's really kind of figuring out what is it you like to do and then think, could you do that thing in a social setting? Whatever it is, you just start to add in the social connection. If you like going shopping, go and shop with a friend or go to a shop where you chat with the local people. I'll give you another example of this. So I used to live near a small town called Bruton, town of about 2,000 people. And I was in the Whole Food shop in Bruton. And because I'd seen this old woman on crutches who walked the whole length of the town to come to the Whole Food shop. And it was clearly an effort for her. I was just chatting with the people who were serving at the shop, like you do. And I thought, okay, well, have you got other people like that? And also, are there people who have memory loss who come to the shop? And they went, oh, yeah, no, we have lots of them. And I say, well, what happens if they want to pay? And they say, well, we keep their card details here so that if they've forgotten their card or they can't remember their PIN number or whatever it is, they can still buy their shopping. And you can see how shops actually are a place of connection. Or do you sit in a cafe and chat with other people? Or, this is one of the great inventions that happened in Frome is Jenny decided she would have talking cafes because there are people who don't like going to groups. So what do you do about those people? They still want to, they live on their own. They might want to chat with people. So she thought, well, why don't we have a talking cafe? So she went to the Cheese and Grain on a Saturday morning and said, can we take a couple of tables and we'll just put a sign saying talking cafe and people can come and sit and chat. And that really worked well. There were loads of people who just come along to the talking cafe to chat. And as it turns out that at the same time, the rambling group, the walking group also met at the Cheese and Grain and they would come in at the end of that. And then you start thinking about things like park runs. The way that park runs developed was this guy, he said his life was pants. And, he'd lost his job, he'd lost his girlfriend, and he liked running, but he didn't want to have the kind of militaristic running that happened in his private school. He just wanted to meet with his friends. So he to Bushy Park, they just met up and they went for a coffee afterwards. And anyone could join, and they got a token when they did the run, and you could walk the 5K or you could run the 5K. It didn't matter. It made it really easy to join. And then, well, it's so easy and straightforward that there are now 20 million people running parkruns every week because of this whole thing about social connection. So the key is to recognize what you like doing and then see if you can do that with other people.
Mm.
I think people completely miss the importance of that in so many instances. Another example that comes to mind is people that love cold water swimming. Many people assume that the benefits they're getting is from the exposure to the cold, but I think the lion's share of the benefits are from the community that comes with it. Going outside with people that you like, doing something in nature, getting the exposure to light, getting the additional physical activity, having a coffee afterwards. It's everything around it that matters.
Charlie, sing the sentence.
Before we move on to the next section, just a quick break to talk about Thriver.
That's got to be used. We have to use that.
It was so good.
So what is Thriver? Well, it's a platform to support healthy longevity. It provides at-home blood testing that helps you understand what's going on in your body. And with their tests, you can establish a baseline for your health and take steps to sustainably improve it.
You order your test online, do it at home, post it back, and within a few days, you get your doctor's report explaining where all your levels are. We've done it, and I can confirm it's super easy to do at home. Also, I'm a picture of health and have more vitamin D than Dr. P.
Yeah, not anymore, mate. Sorry about that. So if you're interested in learning more about your health, or you just want to show off like Charlie does all the time, you can order your kit online at thriver.co.
That's Thriver with a .co.
All right, should we get to these questions then?
Let's. So now we're going to move into the experience section, which is where we've gathered some listener questions, which we'd like to put to you. So these ones have all been emailed in, so I'll just read them to you now. So the first one is from Aliyah. They're from London. So they have said, I'm from abroad, have lived here for 10 years, in my late 30s now, and recently had a baby. When I first moved here, my partner and I worked very hard to make friends, and I did well with that. As London is so transient, there were always people coming and going, but we always maintained a decent group of friends. With the COVID pandemic, 4 of our close couple friends all left in the same month. They were all expats. Then gradually, our more local friends moved back to their hometowns in the UK. My partner can cope with the lack of friends. He games a few times a week, and that's his way of keeping in touch with old friends. I don't have this, and I have tried to make friends in London, joining running clubs, yoga, awkward Bumble BFF dates to meet anyone I gelled with. I now have some friends in London, but all live 1 to 2.5 hours from where I live. It takes a lot of effort to maintain the friendships, and now that I have a young baby, it feels very hard. I'm actively joining mum groups. They are nice, but the conversations don't really deviate from sleep schedules and pushchairs despite my efforts. What's your advice to get around this?
So, funnily enough, when we had our first child, we moved from London to a small village in Somerset. And we found that the process of having a child is a way that you can develop incredible friendships. Because what happens is when you go to a toddlers group and you start chatting to the people there, and when you move on to the nursery or the school, you find yourself standing outside the school gates and chatting to other parents. And then as that develops over time, what happens is that you start giving your child lifts to sports clubs and all of that kind of stuff. And before you know it, over the years, you've made some great friends. So that the isolation and loneliness in London, particularly if you haven't got, long-standing family and friends, is problematic. But look for local things that you can do. And the conversation might be boring right now with the other mothers because it's dominated by sleep and feeding and that kind of stuff. But over time, that will change. Look for places where social connection goes on that's easy and straightforward. The experience of originally having a child can be quite isolating because you've got this baby that's so dependent on you. But then over time, what happens is that spreads and you develop these lifelong friends.
Suppose if she's looking for something that's not maybe child related, I've noticed a massive increase in women's only paddleboarding. I know a few of my friends that are in London have really enjoyed that as an experience. It gets you outdoors. That could be another option. So the next question is from Pam from East Sussex. They have asked, I'm now a carer for my husband who doesn't want me inviting people round for a meal. It's okay for me to go out for a short while, but not too far away as his condition and illogical behaviour varies. I find socialising more difficult as my main interests require energy outdoor pursuits, walking, etc. But the ongoing stress of being a carer 24/7 drains that away. Any suggestions as to how to cope with the stress is welcome.
So that's such a great question and so common. And the key to all of this, which is something that really I developed through the whole palliative care side of things, is about thinking about supportive networks. I'm really sorry to hear this person, for both of them who are caught in this situation.
Yeah.
But loneliness and isolation is something that doesn't just happen to the person with the illness, it happens to the carer as well. And if you're thinking about caring for somebody in the long term, it is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So the key to this is mobilizing your networks of support. And sometimes the person who is ill doesn't want to see other people. They don't have energy for it, or loads of other reasons about why they don't want to see other people. So then it's kind of going, okay, well, how can we make sure that the tasks of life are things that you get support with? If you're doing everything, the shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, as well as all the caring, you become swamped by this stuff and you can't get out. But if you think about, okay, well, are there other people who could contribute to this, and are there family members who could come by and give me a couple of hours break? And is there a friend who I could go out and sit and have a cup of coffee with? Behind all of this is the thing that makes the biggest difference is love and friendship. And so what you're doing is you're not going, what does my husband need to make it all right for him? But what do I need to be able to survive as a carer? And it's important to have that conversation with your husband as well, because otherwise he may just be focusing on, oh, I just need you to be there for me. Whereas you can say, actually, this is a team effort because you have carer exhaustion and all of the things that happen as a consequence of being a carer. So the key bit around this is mobilizing your networks of support. In the context of caring, it's all about family, friends, neighbours, community members. And it's not about care for the person with the illness, it's care for the person who is caring for the person with the illness.
Yeah.
And if Pam can look after herself better, then she's probably going to be a more positive person to be around in general.
Absolutely.
Which might have a beneficial effect on their relationship too.
Exactly.
Last one is about grief. And this is from Anonymous, not left a name. So they have asked, I lost my mum last August. She was my rock, my best friend. We lived together and she helped me raise my son since he was a baby. He's turning 8 soon. My whole world has been turned upside down. I'm a single parent trying to keep up with the bills and figure out a work schedule that actually brings money in, all while grieving. I have family who want to support me, but they're over an hour away and I don't want to move from my home. I don't want to interrupt my son's school schedule and his normal routine. I feel very vulnerable right now and I'm not really sure how to help myself or my family through this.
This is another great question, and it also comes back to the 90% looking after the 10%, because this happens multiple times in people's lives. So one of the really extraordinary things about grief and loss is that when you ask people who have been through it about what helped them most, what was the most beneficial, it was family, friends, neighbours, community members, etc., etc. And professional support was actually the least helpful. So that then says, okay, think about community-related activities, some of which are directly to do with grief support, and some of which are nothing to do with grief support. In other words, this very basic human contact. And if the listener's son goes to school, are there things that she could do with other people in the non-grief related things that she likes to do just for that social connection? And that can be along the lines that we've already spoken about.
Yeah.
If she's overwhelmed by grief and is struggling to connect, then other people are also in this situation. And in many places now, there are community cafes, which are grief groups. And those are places that just drop-in places where you can go and you'll find you're not the only one like this. Oh my God, there's loads of people like this. And then connecting with those people. Or there are things like, so there's a couple of things I can suggest right away. There's something called the Grief Gang podcast, which is Amber Jeffrey, who is a mixed race young woman who lost her mum. And she searched around for years to try and find some kind of support and couldn't find anything where she could talk to people like her, who looked like her, who were young and were mixed race or whatever background. So she said, oh, right, I've got to do it myself because no one else is going to do it. And she did. And now she's got this fantastic podcast where lots of people contact her because they're in this situation. Or her friends, Ben and Jack, who started up a charity called The New Normal because they lost their dads. And they just wanted a place where they could speak about their dads. And so they have all of these different forms of grief groups which people can link to and find other people who are in this situation. So again, I'm sorry to hear about this listener who's lost her mum, is a single parent and facing all of the difficulties of that sense of grief and loss we all visit many times. But look to community to helping you through it.
So that's the end of our listener questions. So we just like at the end of every episode, Julian, to ask our guest if they had to leave people with one takeaway from today, what would that be?
Oh, yeah. Social relationships, good social relationships, are the foundation of health and happiness. There isn't anything better that you can do. Whenever you hear about fear-mongering, whether it's through the media or whatever it is, that's the antithesis of what is really helpful for having a long, healthy, happy life.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you both.
Thanks, Julian. Nice to meet you. What a nice guy. Charlie, takeaways from today?
Key takeaways, yeah, I think just reiterating the importance of a community, but also looking for what that looks like for you. It doesn't look the same for everyone. Like that first listener question, she's tried a running club, she's tried mum and baby groups, and they're just not suiting her. But there are so many options out there now. I think FaceTime was a big one that we didn't really cover much, but for me, I literally did it on Saturday night, just FaceTimed one of my friends for a bit, and she's 45 minutes away, but then you feel like you've actually seen them, chat for half an hour, make sure you're both okay, and then you feel like you've seen them, but you've not, and it's a community.
Yeah. I think for many people, in person is better than video call, which is better than phone call, which is better than
voice note, which is better than
text messages.
What's after that? Email?
Oh, God.
I'm going to start emailing.
Signature.
It's going to start
the best wishes.
Emailing you kind regards. Regards if I'm annoyed at you.
Just name Charlie.
Charlie, full stop. I could do Charlotte, and then I'd be really angry.
Oh, wow.
If you just got Charlotte, full stop.
That's the bottom.
You'd think, that's it, the friendship's gone. Done. What were your key takeaways from today?
Well, my initial one is the same. I like the simplicity of it. Do whatever you enjoy in a community.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we didn't get to is the importance of paying attention. Julian spoke about how there can be a cascade of positive events in daily life when we do something nice for someone else. And I think the problem is that so many of us are distracted nowadays.
Yeah.
And so we miss those opportunities. And some of that probably is related to the modern environment, our phones and so on. And then we didn't really speak about the healthcare system, but I do think that to realise the potential of this approach, and Frome is a perfect case in point, the ideas that we discussed have to be applied systemically within healthcare systems. And In that first publication, the authors emphasised the benefits of having a steering group for each local area when trying to improve the practice. And it strikes me that that's a really good place to start in that setting.
That one about cascade of positive events, though, and it's almost contagious, isn't it? I always think if I'm ever sat, with a friend or whatever, and there's a group of girls having the time of their life on the table next to you, you're instantly like, it's contagious, isn't it? You have to laugh along with them. If you see them belly laughing, you think they're having a great time, and it makes you smile, it makes you laugh. Yeah, I'm gonna go and open the door. So who are you opening the door for today? Who are you holding the door open for and cascading your positivity?
I've just got a 2-hour work call and then bedtime.
Wild. You are living a glam life. You've been listening to The Method, Health in the Real World, a podcast brought to you by Thriver.
If you don't know about Thriver, it's a health tracking platform that helps you see where your health is heading and what to work on, as well as how to do it. They use painless at-home blood testing to look inside your body and see what's going on. Your tests are analysed by accredited labs, and based on the results, which are reviewed by doctors, you get personalised guidance from real people. People use Thriver like a compass, testing every few months to help steer their health to where they'd like it to be. It's a great tool to start feeling more empowered about your health and to get information that you need to make progress, even when life is chaotic.
Thriver also has some great content out there that can help you get to grips with complex health questions, exactly like what we're trying to do on this podcast. And all of that is free to access. So if you want to learn more, head over to thriver.co. That's thriver.co.
And if you want to listen to Charlie sing really, really well, subscribe to the show. Come back every week for more tunes. You won't be disappointed?
Well, unless you beg me to stop, but even then, probably not.
You can find us by email at themethod@thriver.co.
Seriously, we'd love to hear all of your questions. And your voice. We love a voice note.
Special thanks to the Thriver team and to Lower Street for helping us bring the show to life. Content direction by Rich Cousins, Hamish Grierson, Tamar Loach, Vishal Shah, and Katie Yockey. Production by our resident yogi, Lise Devati, as well as Ryan Sutton and Sam Dattapoolen. Sound design by Alex Rose.
We're your hosts, Charlie Edmondson and Greg Potter, and we will see you next time.
Thanks and bye.
I heard a great quote that life is too short not to have dogs on your bed. So open the kitchen door.
Do you know
up
what?
and let
You're
them
the
in.
second person that said that to me this week. It's so strange that that's come up because I'm quite strict with my dogs. And I'm like, no, stay downstairs. It's like, but they're only here for such a short period of time. I was like, do not finish that sentence.
Don't worry, it gets worse. Apparently dogs that sleep on the bed live 3 or 4 more years longer than dogs that don't.
No, they don't. No, please tell me you're joking. Julian, are you joking? Because I'm going to go get them now.
I'm not joking. That's
3 or
denial.
4 years.
Yeah.
Right. Dougal doesn't know what's going to... He's going to think all his Christmases have come at once tonight. Oh no. All the rules are going out the window now.
That's it, yeah. Chuck the rules out the window.
I'll send you a picture later of both dogs.
Yeah, perfect.
Tucked up.
Yeah.
Tucked in.